This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with your host, Vicki Davis.
Today's sponsor is eSpark. Stay tuned to learn about this amazing differentiation and intervention tool for kindergarten through 5th grade reading and math teachers. Oh, I'm so excited today. We are talking with Dr. Carol Tomlinson, Chair of Education Leadership, Foundation, and Policy at the University of Virginia. And she's also author of Everybody's Classroom, Differentiating for the Shared and Unique Needs of Diverse Students. And Carol, today we are going to talk about differentiating instruction in the math classroom. And we're focusing on elementary, kindergarten. Can you actually differentiate instruction for math for younger students?
I think you have to. And I think that's probably the game plan all the way through school. I think there are things that all of the kids need to do together in math, but I think any teacher who's been in the classroom 15 minutes knows that just because we thought kids could learn something in 2 days doesn't mean they all did, and some of them already knew it, and some of them really are going to need considerably more time than that. So I think part of the plan is to think about shared experiences that kids can have, for example, with learning numbers or learning to count simple things, and make sure that those really cause kids to think and to try to express themselves and to show themselves in different ways. Here's a way I think of it. Here's something I can do. And then to have some time that's set aside consistently so the students in that class can take their own next step.
So you're saying spend time having shared experiences with groups where students are doing things together so they're actually part of that differentiating process.
Yes, I talk about this often in terms of highways and exit ramps. The highways, the time all the kids should be together, thinking about numbers or a little higher up, trying to figure out what multiplication has to do with addition or what that might mean if you're multiplying popcorn or whatever it is you're doing. And all the kids need to be in math conversations with the whole group, or turn and talk with two people, but still in the whole group. And they need to be part of seeing themselves be mathematical thinkers. It's really important for kids to see themselves as part of the whole class. We're a team of learners, and I'm part of that team. And all kids need to see interesting demonstrations by the teacher about whatever they're talking about. They need to share their answers and explain how they got there. They need to try out things with a partner. And so the whole class aspect of math instruction and everything else, I think, is critically important. We are an us, and we need to be an us a lot of the time. But then there are times consistently where some kids need to spend a little bit more time on something. Some go back and patch up things or don't have the prerequisite skills they need. And some kids learn in different ways and would do much better if they could use a different mode of learning. And some kids are ready to move ahead. So the highway needs to have periodic exit ramps, and by predictable and frequent, not once every 2 weeks, part of every day, so that kids can work on things they're interested in or things that take them to their next step, or try out new ideas with peers. And even in those exit ramps, I think it's important for kids to collaborate so that they feel a part of a group. Important from my perspective to say that those exit ramps groups should not be bluebirds, buzzards, and wombats, so that every time they get together, they sit in the same place, and the kids that are having trouble are always together, and the kids that are flying high are always together. That's not helpful either. They need to have very flexible grouping as well.
So this is very real to me. My mom was a teacher, and even though I went to Georgia Tech, took a lot of calculus, the hardest thing I ever really learned was actually addition. I remember first grade didn't make sense to me, and Mom sat down at the table and we added apples, and sometimes we added M&Ms, and I just remember how she worked with me one-on-one. Math didn't make sense to me, but then when the light bulb went on, it changed my life. So just because these basic concepts are difficult for students doesn't really say anything about their intelligence level, I would hope.
And that's one reason that we don't want to have bluebirds, buzzards, and wombats, because that does become predictive. Kids with less opportunity often end up in the buzzards, and everybody begins to think of them as buzzards, and they begin to think of themselves that way. And we have every reason to believe that every kid has much more capacity than we can see. And we need, they're smart, not plug them into a slot that's going to become a stereotype.
So fill in the blank for me, Carol. As teachers differentiate math instruction and the elementary grades, the biggest mistake they could make is blank.
I think teaching it as an algorithm, teaching it as this is what we're doing, this is how you do it, now do it, versus having conversations about how that makes sense to you, and why you do something, and what other ways you can do it. And look how cool it is that we can get the same answer 4 or 5 different ways, and everybody can explain it, and we learn more that way. I think part of the reason you discussed your floundering in math, my floundering happened because at a bad juncture for me. I had a teacher who had no patience for anybody that couldn't see her do something on the board and reproduce it. And it made no sense to me, and I was terrified. And so that sense, you can think your way through it, and he can think his way through it a different way than you. One of the big ideas of math that I really love is there's an infinite number of ways to get the same answer. And I think we need to show kids that in a classroom.
Wow. Some teachers feel, obviously, these days, a lot of teachers feel a lot of stress, and they have a lot to quote cover. Oh, I know you probably cringe at that word, like a lot of us teachers do. What's your advice to the teacher who just feels like they have so much to quote cover that they feel like they don't have the time to differentiate?
Well, I certainly understand why teachers feel that. The pressure on them is immense. But not only do we not have any evidence that when the teacher covers something, all the students learn it, or even that most of them learn it, we understand now that really is teaching in a way that's totally unbrain friendly. Howard Gardner long ago said the enemy of understanding is coverage. And David Sousa, who works on the brain, talks about the fact that coverage races are not brain friendly. And if we're thinking that the most important thing is that we cover something, and we have forgotten that the aim is that the students learn, then that's where we need to start rethinking things. Our goal, though, I think is twofold: to help students learn as much as they can, but also to dignify them as thinkers and as human beings, and to excite them about the world around them. That's a good reason to teach. Covering stuff for a test is not. And I think anytime we start feeling a huge amount of pressure, and we end up hearing ourselves say or think something like, I can't teach kids so they can learn because I have to cover this myself. Listen to that and think we regroup. Truth is that teachers are much happier and much more creative when they're teaching kids for meaning, and when they can do it in creative ways and help kids be creative. And we also, this is hard for us to trust, but we have good evidence that when teachers teach students for meaning, they do better on the tests than when we teach them the algorithms and cover things. So I think there's powerful evidence for that, but habits are powerful too.
So describe for me, Carol, a classroom or a teacher that you may have met recently. You don't have to share a name, but just describe what you saw happening in that classroom that got you really excited and you felt like that teacher understood the research and the things you espouse that need to happen for differentiated instruction in math.
I can think of two. One is a 4th grade class. I think the other one is young children. So I'll start with the little guys, and then you can decide if we have time for another example. But this was a class in kindergarten where kids were learning numbers. And so they were learning to count from 1 to 3 and 1 to 5 and on up. And the teacher, of course, they were counting everything. They'd count the days in the week that were left, the days in the week that were gone, how many people were wearing red shirts, everything got counted all day. But at a math center, she assigned students to go at various points in the day, and all of them were doing work to determine something about how many students were in their class. And what she did at the center, I think, is probably not terribly remarkable, but what she did was to give them all the task to do that was a little ahead of where they were functioning comfortably. The coolest thing about it was that after the time at the center, she met with the kids, and her conversations with them were really wonderful. So one group had to determine how many students were in their class that day, how many people are here. And those little guys were adorable to watch. They're walking around counting people who are moving at the same time they're moving. A little faded, but that was not a surprise. And then you'd see them counting as they knew to count: 1, 2, 3, 7, 9, 11. And so the numbers were just all over the place. The conversation she had with them was wonderful. She went through each of the kids. Tell us how many people you thought were here today. How did you get that number? Do you think more people are here today than Jack does, or does Jack think there are more people than you? Oh, did you all get the same answer? No. Should we all get that same answer? Yeah. But then some kid would say, not if somebody left to go to the office. And then she ended up by saying, since you didn't get the same answer, do you think it would be worth doing this again tomorrow and trying again and see how we are thinking about it? They thought that was a great idea. And the conversation really positioned them as mathematical thinkers. She did the same thing with a second group, pretty much the same questions. That group was supposed to figure out how many kids were there and how many kids were absent. And of course, it's much harder to count something that's not there. They talked about that. They talked about greater than, less than, how they had gotten their answer. And she did the same thing again with them. And she also, after the how did you get your answer, I've forgotten what the other question was, but it had to do really with their next step in reasoning. And then a third group had to count how many boys were there, how many boys were absent, how many girls were there, and how many girls were absent. And the one question she asked them that was different than the others was, explain to us how you know you're right. The other kids investigation with numbers, thinking about numbers, finding different ways to do things by listening to each other. But this group, even at that age, was ready to say, I'm right because I know this and explain it. It was a wonderful way to have all the kids together for the lead-in, different tasks for them to do at a center, and then conversations that accepted where they were and pushed them on a little bit further. And of course, that's a cycle that they'll keep going through. But that, I think, is an example of a classroom where all of the kids are sharing good and exciting and interesting beginning instruction and asked to do work that pushes them on a bit, and then are talked with as though they're really mathematical thinkers, because that's what they're trying to do.
I love the part of the conversation, because I think that truly great conversations are very much a part of excellent classrooms. And it's something that AI and algorithms and robotics are never going to be able to do, is to have those meaningful conversations that truly push kids. I love that. So let's talk about your second example, because we want to have two.
This is a teacher who, I really can't remember the grade level, fourth grade maybe, but this is a teaching channel video. And this teacher is talking about how interested her students have become in math as a result of the kind of thinking they're doing. And she seems to be reflecting on a time when it was more algorithmic, formula-like. And so she's having a discussion with, I've forgotten exactly what the topic is, but she'll ask the kids, somebody to volunteer to do something, and they come up and do a demonstration. And then before that, she'll always say to the kids, turn to somebody and talk about what you're thinking and challenge each other's thinking. Does your thinking agree? Is your thinking helping each other? And after they've done that, then they finally get to the place where she'll say, okay, let's do a true-false problem. And this is not exactly what they were doing, not the same problem, but the same understandings. And so the kids determine whether they think the answer that she gave to this problem is correct or not, true or false. And she says they love the true-false thing because they love to be able to defend stuff. And she's watching the kids, and they keep doing the turn and talk, and then this little gal explains why another student was wrong. And her answer is adorable. She's using the idea of having M&Ms, for example, that the student's going to divide, and she gives this many to this kid, and this many to this kid, and this many to this kid. And in the end, this other little girl, that can't really be right, because after she's gone to the first two girls, she's already given them away. And so there isn't anything to give to the third one. And the other kids are hearing that kind of reasoning. And she says to one little boy, so what did you think about what she said? How did that make you think? And clearly he wasn't really tuned in and didn't listen. And one thing I love about it is when he pauses and it's obvious that he didn't hear what she said, that doesn't bother the teacher. She says, okay, what she says was this and this. How do you feel about that? And he thinks about it for a minute. And he said, she's beginning to make me think I was wrong. So she caused you to rethink and to understand more deeply? Yes, ma'am, I think she did. And so it's this merged conversation. But when that video was posted, and then people who watch it can post a comment, the first one there, not surprisingly, was, well, surely you don't think all the kids understand this after that lesson. And her response back to it was, oh no, this was just the whole class lesson. meaning again that they're going to be doing things that help them go down that pathway to understanding with what comes after this.
Carol, thank you for coming on the show. You've really helped us understand differentiating instruction with the elementary classroom. This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you, eSpark, for sponsoring today's episode. eSpark is a differentiation and intervention tool that helps teachers of kindergarten through grade 5 save time by providing ready-to-go, standards-based reading and math activities that students love. eSpark is free for teachers. Each quest in eSpark includes a pre-quiz, framing videos, instructional videos, practice activities, critical thinking challenges, a post-quiz, and optional student recording. I love that for activities to remain in the eSpark catalog, it must have a high in student engagement rating based on student-chosen thumbs up or thumbs down. You can even import NWEA or STAR data to give students a more differentiated experience from the first logon. Oh, and did I say it is free for teachers? So go to go.espark.app/CoolCatTeacher. That's go.espark.app/CoolCatTeacher and sign up today for eSpark. You'll be glad that you did. And as always, email me at Vicki@CoolCatTeacher.com. That's VICKI@CoolCatTeacher.com to let me know what you think about today's sponsor or today's show.
You've been listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. If you like this program, you can find more at CoolCatTeacher.com. If you wish to see more content by Vicki Davis, you can find her on Facebook and Twitter under CoolCatTeacher. Thank you for listening.